Hi guys, Caroline from CarolineVenzel.com, and I'm here today to talk to you about emergency funds. Okay, I know that you guys have probably heard of emergency funds at some point or another, but it's basically a giant chunk of change inside of a savings account that is there for you to use in case of an emergency. Now, we are talking like an actual emergency. We are talking unforeseen expenses with the car, or a kid has to go to the hospital and you wind up with a big medical bill, or you have to go to the hospital and wind up with a big medical bill. There's a hole in the roof and you need to fix it, or somebody loses a job, any kinds of things that are out of normal expenses. So we're not talking that it's there for, whoops, I spent too much at Target, better use the money inside of the emergency fund to fill back up the checking account. No, an emergency fund is there to save you in case of an emergency. So let's back up really quick, because one of the things that everyone has heard about emergency funds is that you need a $1,000 emergency fund. $1,000 is not going to help. It's a great starting point. If you want to start and say, my first goal, my first milestone for hitting in my emergency fund is $1,000, do that. But you have to keep going further from there. And the reason is because, again, think about it this way. If your car's transmission blew, or whatever cars do, I'm not a car person, how much does it cost to replace a transmission in a car? It's a lot of money. Then let's assume that the same week you have a kid who has to go to urgent care, and then they wind up getting admitted to the hospital. What if you have a kid who needs to have a lot of blood work done? What if you cut your hand or something and you have to get stitches? All of these different kinds of things that are genuine emergencies. These are things that you couldn't have predicted that could happen. The best thing to do is to have a nice chunk of change set aside inside of your emergency fund to make sure that it's there to protect you so that you don't go further into debt or get into debt while you are trying to get control of your money life. So one of the things that I hear a lot is, do I build up an emergency fund after I pay off debt or during? How does that work? I personally recommend the whole concept of you can pay your minimum debt payments until you have funded your emergency fund. The reason being is because there would be nothing worse. Well, there are many things. There wouldn't be anything quite as bad as you finally get out of debt. It's amazing. Everything's wonderful. And then an emergency happens right afterwards, and you wind up having to go back into debt to pay that off. That is the opposite of what I would want to see for you. So what I recommend is building up your emergency fund, paying off your debt, minimum payments for the time being, just so that you can build up the emergency fund to have in case of emergency, so that way in the future, in the not too distant future, you're able to put all of that money towards your debt payments and know that you are taken care of financially in case of an emergency. Life is unpredictable. If anything over the past year has taught us that, it is completely that life is unpredictable. We never know what's going to happen. The best thing that we can do is prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Preparing for the worst, like we can all picture worst case scenarios, whatever they are in your head. Hoping for the best is, I save up this emergency fund and I never have to touch it. I never have to use it. Wouldn't that be great? And then you know it's there just in case you do need it. Let's talk about, how do you figure out how much you need inside of an emergency fund? I prefer the concept of having 3 to 6 months of your bare bones living expenses set aside inside of an emergency fund. Your bare bones expenses would be your housing, your utilities, your cars, whether that's the payments, the insurance, the gas, all of that. Housing could include rent, mortgage, HOA, taxes, all the stuff that you need to keep your house. Your utilities, the gas for your house, the oil for your house, the electric bill, whatever other expenses that you have to keep the lights on inside of your house. Then you have your grocery expenses, meaning that obviously you're going to need food, right? Like, we can't pretend like that doesn't happen. Even in an emergency, you're going to need food. You also need to factor in your minimum debt payments as well. All of those different kinds of things, and everyone is different inside of their budget. So your bare bones budget would look different than mine, but make sure that you are only listing out the necessary expenses for life. Does that make sense? So we need to make sure that these are the things that we take care of before we ever go into and saving for vacation and doing anything fun with our money and going and getting takeout and going to Target. Whatever those things are, those get factored out. The bare bones budget is just what you need to survive. Once you figure that out, we're just going to call it a nice round $5,000, okay? Maybe yours is less, maybe yours is more. I'm choosing 5 because whenever I say $3,000, I get yelled at. So we're going to call it 5. You have $5,000 of expenses in your bare bones budget each month to keep the lights on, keep the roof over your head, and keep food in your refrigerator. So you are going to need 3 months of $5,000 expenses inside of your emergency fund to make sure that you are protected. So what that would mean is you need to have $15,000 inside of your emergency fund to protect you from those kinds of expenses. I do it this way because of job loss, because so many people, especially right now, there's job loss rampant. This has always been a problem. If someone loses their job and they were the primary breadwinner, then we're up the creek without a paddle. I am a financial feminist through and through, but let's just say if it's your husband who's the primary breadwinner, who's making more of the money in the household right now, if he gets sick and is out of work for a period of time, he might be able to get short-term disability. He might not. And in that case, even if he did get short-term disability, you're looking at 50 to 70% of his income is all you would get. You would have to make up either 50 or 30% of his income. What happens if he's out of work for a long period of time? What happens if he's furloughed? What happens if he's let go? What happens if whoever is in charge of making more of the money in your household is let go, or one of the two of you? We want to be sure that we are taking care of ourselves in the period of time where it might be tumultuous, where it might be really difficult to navigate. And sometimes it takes a while before you're able to find a new job or you're able to find a new source of income. It's usually not something that happens directly overnight. So you want to be able to give yourself that kind of cushion before you have to start really worrying. You could go up to 6 months. You could go up to 12 months, however you want to do it. It is there. Your emergency fund is there to protect you, to keep you safe, to allow you to keep the roof over your heads in case of an emergency situation so that it doesn't derail your money life, so that you can keep having a good life and enjoying yourself and being able to keep food in your belly and a roof over your head. And it also makes sure that you don't go deeper into debt or go into debt in the first place. I want to make sure that we understand this isn't for impulse spending. This isn't for something like, oh, well, I have $15,000 in that account, so I can buy what I want. We are talking about making sure that this is going to save you from going into debt or getting into even worse financial situations. So I hope that that makes sense about your emergency fund. And here's one last thing that I want to say about emergency funds really quick. Everybody's finances are different. Yours are different than mine. Mine are different than hers. Mine are different than hers. Mine are different than everybody's. Everyone is different. Every single one of us is different. And the reason that I'm saying that is because maybe the idea of having to save up $5,000 or inside of an emergency fund is crazy town for you right now. Maybe you're like, all I need is $2,000 to put aside. Then that's totally fine. You do it. Do whatever makes sense for you. I'm telling you what I have seen and what I would want to make sure that I have for my family. Make sure that you're protecting yourself now and in the future. And maybe you'll never have to use it. And if that's the case, then awesome sauce. You never have to use it. But just in case you ever do need to use it, you want to be protected. I hope that all of that makes sense about emergency funds. And if you need any more information on where I would store my emergency fund, I'm going to put it in the links down below so that you can see it, and other tools that I use to build it up on autopilot. I will see you guys in the next video. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you think about the emergency funds that you have or want to have. I'll see you next time. Bye.